The wolves stood there, curiously watching him. His situation was potentially deadly without their interference, but the wolves added to the growing threat. After a few minutes of watching him struggle in the frozen waters, they descended the hill. The terrified boy was quickly surrounded, and the wolves howled. What was their plan? Were they waiting for an opportunity to strike? Their next course of action caught the boy completely off guard. The Neman River runs through Belarus, and in the cold winter months, it's known to freeze over. For one of the local residents, Viktor Alandau, it was a favorite time of the year. When winter rolled around, he could use his wooden sled to go sledding and play on the ice. He enjoyed nothing more than rolling down the frozen hills. However, the little boy had no idea how quickly things could take a turn for the worse. Victor might have only been 10 years old, but he was no pushover. He felt that it would be harder to impress him than any of his peers. While the other children were more than happy with sitting at home and watching TV, he wasn't too fond of it. He preferred to adventure outside and discover what the world had to offer. Being an adventurous boy, he enjoyed climbing trees and playing in the park. But the thing he adored most was sledding. That was why winter was a paradise in his eyes. Christmas, which was just around the corner, was waiting to make his favorite season even better. Cold snow, festivities, hot cocoa, and presents beneath the tree. It was all he could have asked for and more. The excited little Viktor unwrapped his present, and he couldn't be happier. His parents had gotten him a wooden sled that he would be able to put to use right away. All he wanted was to go out and play. There were so many possibilities that he completely forgot about the dangers. Dangers he knew of all too well. As his parents saw the excitement in his eyes, they decided to reiterate what they'd told him before. They warned him of the dangers he would face if he wandered too far from the house. It was known that wolves would roam the forests outside of Minsk, but Victor had never encountered one himself. As most children do, Victor didn't bother about the warning. All he wanted was to go out and play. A week later, he wished he had paid attention when his parents were talking. On that fateful day, Victor could barely contain his excitement. He grabbed his sled and headed out to play. He just couldn't wait to roll down the snowy hills surrounding the river. The Neman River formed beautiful snowy hills in the winter. They were especially great where the river's edge usually was during the summer months. However, the 10-year-old had no idea of how fragile the ice that coated the river could be. Victor scouted the area for a nice little hill he could slide down. Once he found one, he headed to the top and took a seat on his sled before pushing himself down the little mountain. He pushed himself down once, twice, 3 times. The little boy was overjoyed each time. He felt the wind rushing through his hair. But things went wrong on his 6th attempt. That time he didn't have a soft landing. Instead, he skidded over the frozen river, and when he came to a halt, he heard the sound of ice cracking beneath him. Victor had just ended up in a terrible situation. The ice on that part of the river was thinner than he thought it would be, and it started cracking. Being only 10 years old, he had no equipment or experience to deal with the situation he had gotten himself into. However, things were about to get a whole lot worse. The young boy was about to be thrown from the frying pan into the flame. One last loud crack echoed through the woods. The ice gave way beneath him, and Victor fell into the ice-cold water. He was fully submerged for a moment, but managed to get his head out of the water. The situation was dire. Even as young as he was, he knew that. He wished he'd listened to his parents, but more than that, he wished one of them was there to save him. As he struggled to stay above water, he noticed that something was watching him. His parents' words from a week ago flashed through his mind. It dawned upon him that his situation was about to get a lot worse. Victor could clearly see the wolf pack watching him. They were clearly trying to take advantage of the situation he had put himself into. At that moment, Victor wanted the wolves to vanish and wake up in his warm, cozy home. He wanted nothing more than to disappear from the icy river that was surrounded by wolves. His hot tears streamed down his frozen face. He had no idea what to do to get out of the situation, but he had no idea that the wolves had been formulating a plan of their own. The wolves watched in morbid curiosity. His situation was already potentially deadly, but the wolves posed their own complicating threat. After watching him struggle in the river for a minute, they finally decided to descend the hill. They surrounded the terrified boy and howled at him. Were they just waiting for the perfect opportunity to attack? What they did next surprised the boy. One of the wolves took the first step forward. It seemed as if she was the matriarch. She lunged for Victor and managed to get a hold of his collar. The boy was understandably terrified and screamed. With eyes shut, Victor was pulled against the ice. He tried to understand what the wolf was doing. Then it all made sense. He understood that the wolves were only trying to help him. They weren't biting him, but tugging at his clothes to try and pull him from the hole in the icy surface. Knowing this, he tried desperately to cling to the ice ledge, but it was too slippery. Then another wolf stepped forward to help. Together, they tried desperately to pull him out, but Victor had no idea how the situation would end. After a lot of tugging, Victor managed to pull himself onto the ice with the help of the wolves. They looked down at him with concern in their eyes. He was not convinced that they were trying to help above all else. Still in shock, he lay on his back while he caught his breath. The wolves stood with him to ensure he stayed out of trouble. Victor still knew they could be dangerous and didn't want to see the limits of their kindness. Instead, he smiled at the wolves that had saved him and slowly trudged back home. The wolves stood by the river and watched him leave. He turned back to look at them before making it over the hill where he couldn't see the Nemen River anymore. At least he had a once-in-a-lifetime story that he could share. This encounter was definitely something that Victor will never forget, but what would happen if the roles were reversed? What if it was the wolf who was in danger instead of the person? Would the results still be the same?